This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight, she's returning for the third time, Sylvia Demarest. We are going to be talking about the power and influence of the Jewish infrastructure in the United States. Sylvia, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Regis, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing great, and it's always good to have you. Let's begin by explaining for me and for our viewers what the ADL is, the Anti-Defamation League, and how they work in tandem with the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. Help me sort this out.
Well, I think we should have discussed the ADL previously. It's an organization that's been around for a long time. It's extremely powerful. It raises at this point about $100 million a year. It does a report every year on the annual audit of anti-Semitism incidents, and they include in that audit any criticism of Israel or of Zionism, and they work in tandem with the ADL. With the AIPAC, as you mentioned. They have 25 different regional offices around the United States, and they have been involved since about 25 years ago with trying to get this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act passed that just passed the House of Representatives in the United States. And in order to do that, they have really created an entire infrastructure that cooperates with AIPAC and all the other Jewish influence organizations to not only, create the narrative, but to also propose laws. Like they have been behind the passage of some of these anti-hate crime laws, some of the BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction laws that have been passed across the state. And they've really targeted education. And in doing that, they've created curriculum that is revolving around this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act that just got passed. And they have now become an important part of this infrastructure and a very powerful tool in terms of media in the United States. And Regis, we were just talking about this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. So that has been a goal of all of these organizations for a long time. It just got passed in the House of Representatives, and it passed by a vote that included 320 members of the House voting for it. Only 94 members of the United States House of Representatives voted against this. So we now have a situation where the vast majority of the representatives of our country are completely captured by this infrastructure.
Well, there's 94 representatives that won't get reelected again because, as we know, AIPAC spends a lot of money getting rid of congresspeople and senators who do not swear an oath to Israel, and they're getting lots of money for this. So they've already defeated several people running for Congress or running to retain their seats in Congress and the Senate, and they've defeated them. So they're extremely powerful.
But we'll see how that goes. I saw a survey recently where only a third of American Jews thought that Israel was sincere in wanting peace. We just got a new survey that showed that 75% of Democrats are against what the United States is supporting in Israel. So my hope is that the people of the United States with their Jewish brothers and sisters can come together before we see this infrastructure absolutely put in control of what we can say and do in the United States. And that's what this act is designed to do.
All right. I have to ask you, please explain in more detail what this Anti-Semitism Act does. I mentioned in the opening, from my opinion, it's the final jackboot on the First Amendment in the Constitution. Explain, help me understand, and our viewers, exactly what this thing requires.
Well, it's very vague. It's a very short law. If you look at it, basically it refers everybody to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance and their definition of anti-Semitism and the 11 examples that they use that can be used to judge anti-Semitism. What it requires is that the United States Department of Education use this definition in determining what's going on in colleges and in schools around the United States for purposes of providing federal aid for education. So what they want to see happen, I think, is for anti-Semitism monitors to be in the colleges and in the schools in order to monitor what we say and do. There has been an enormous effort to degrade and destroy the Bill of Rights in the United States. And if there's a bottom line for me, it's that the Bill of Rights is the best thing this country ever did. It's a standard that should be adopted throughout the world for preserving human rights and human liberty. And the hallmark of that is the First Amendment, which guarantees not only freedom of religion, but the right of free speech. And there has been a tremendous effort over the last 4 years to curtail free speech and to censor thought. And so if this law goes into effect, and if what they want to have happen happens, what we're going to see is that any discussion of what is going on in Israel that is not complimentary, any effort to try to expose what Zionism is doing to the country of Israel itself, to the Palestinians and to their neighbors, will be considered to be anti-Semitism and ultimately will probably be punished with criminal penalties. We already see that going on in Europe, where if you get out of line just a little bit, you go to jail for a long, long time. That's what they want to do in the United States. So this is creating a structure which will determine what kind of society we're going to have in the future. Will we have a society of free thought and free exchange of information? Or will we be a society where everyone is in fear of saying anything that might put them before the halls of justice and perhaps cause them to lose their life and liberty? Also in Europe, they're fining the heck out of people who say the wrong thing, and they really want to see that happen in the United States. And we should not even any members of the Jewish community would want to see that. That is not the country that they moved to. That's not the country that they've benefited from. That's not the country that has created the kinds of liberty that we see in the United States, which often is unavailable anywhere else in the world. This is a red line, if you want to say it that way. And we have to stand up and fight against this. We have to preserve the Bill of Rights. It is what has gotten us through every crisis in this country, from the civil rights movement, and will see us through this crisis if we preserve the Bill of Rights. But in order to do that, we need the help of everybody in this country. And I particularly ask my brothers and sisters in the Jewish community to please join with us and to fight this effort to shut down freedom of expression, not only in the United States, but ultimately, if this works here, throughout the world.
Well, I don't think there's much doubt that it's going to pass the Senate. I'm not sure when it goes to the Senate, but it's probably there already. And there's no doubt that Biden will sign this. So I think it's going to become law in the United States. But now, Sylvia, what is this going to do to these pro-Palestinian encampments in, I mean, well over 100 universities in the United States, Canada, and now around the world? What will it do to these protests, to the students, to the people, the adults from all generations in the United States protesting against what Israel is doing with this obscene violence in Palestine?
It's designed to shut it down, and it's designed to punish these students in such a way that they refrain from continuing. Um, you know, at UCLA, we had something that happened that should be very disturbing to everybody. We talked the last time about the fact that U.S. police departments had been going to Israel to be trained and had had Israeli agents come here into the United States to train them. These agents are frequently part of the Israeli intelligence community and part of these businesses that sell these products for surveillance. Well, the incident that happened at UCLA recently was this. There was an Israeli agent on the ground during what was an encampment, and there was a huge force of police that were standing by. And one of the Jewish billionaires had funded some groups to oppose these encampments. And so such a group came on to the campus and began to attack the student protesters. And the police stood by and allowed that to happen. And that group had been funded, I think, by maybe one of the Jewish billionaires that had opposed what was going on in Colombia. And then after that, then the police came in and arrested all the protesters, firing bullets, plastic bullets, etc., and did a whole lot of damage. So that's one example of an Israeli agent actually acting directly in order to deprive these students of their First Amendment rights. I hope somebody looks into this situation, and I hope this person gets sued along with the police department that allowed themselves to be used as a tool for this kind of oppression. What else is going on is that now we see these major law firms, Oliver, Cromwell, and et cetera, coming forth and saying that we've got a list of these students and we're never going to hire them. The fact that these protests are spreading and that more kids are involved in them was one of the impetus for this bill passing. And I want to remind everybody once again, a lot of these students are Jewish. They are Jewish students that are being oppressed by the power of these Jewish organizations and these Jewish billionaires that are trying to control the dialogue in this country. So, one of the reasons to pass this law was so that the universities that do not call the police in to oppress these students will lose federal funding. It's to make sure that even in the elementary and junior highs and high schools of this country, that there's not going to be any real education about what has gone on in the Middle East, what has gone on in Israel, and to make sure that we don't not another generation of Americans gets produced with the conscious, the level of political consciousness to be able to recognize oppression and genocide and to act against it. Because, there's been a lot of criticism of what's been going on in the universities. We've had a situation where instead of using all the federal money and all the student loans to be able to improve education, what these universities have done is to increase the administrative staff and to put in all of these vice presidents for this, that, and the other, and to continuously increase the cost of higher education. Well, they want that to continue. They do not want the universities to allow these encampments to change the attitude and what's going on within these universities in order to make them more democratic, in order for the universities to actually use some of this money to decrease the cost of education, to increase the level and the quality of education that goes on, rather than just adding to the administrative staff and building these buildings that are useless, to actually improve education. And so they are hoping that there will be an outbreak of oppression by the police departments across the United States that will arrest these kids, that will identify them, that will allow the universities to suspend them, that will allow them to be blackballed and allow them to have their lives ruined because they finally and wholeheartedly did the right thing, because it is the right thing to oppress what's going on. Basically, what's going on now with the IDF in Gaza is they are bombing a concentration camp. These people can't leave. They're bombing a concentration camp. They're killing little babies. who have absolutely no safety. And I saw videos of Israelis singing and dancing that these kinds of attacks were going on. What is going on in campus is something that we need to applaud, not something that we need to suppress. That, at least, is my view.
Well, I think a lot of the people agree with you. An awful lot of people, and it's not just students anymore. People in the United States and around the world of all demographic groups realize what is going on in Gaza. Obscene violence and genocide like the world has never seen. People realize what's happening in their countries. You mentioned at the beginning about the oppression and the clampdown across Europe. People in the United States realize that the same thing is happening here. And when you see these police in riot gear, they're goons. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, when we were protesting against the Vietnam War, we called the police and the National Guard pigs. And, you know, I think this acronym does this metaphor does disservice to pigs, but it's an apt description of the behavior of our law enforcement officers and the National Guard back at Kent State who killed students. They opened fire. The same thing is happening today. And this is something that has got to, Sylvia, it's got to wake up the American population.
Well, what has happened is we are seeing now the face of the system of control. The system of control that wants to regulate everything that you have access to in terms of information. We have seen that over the last 4 years. There have been federal lawsuits that have tried to deal with this level of censorship. Now we see the censorship spreading as a result of what's going on in the Middle East and as a result of the challenge that creates for Zionism. And this effort is an effort to basically make the criticism of Zionism equivalent to anti-Semitism, which it's not. As I've said many times, not all Jews are Zionists and not all Zionists are Jews. I've also said many times that there are Holocaust survivors and their families who are standing with these students, protesting what's going on, trying to wake up the American people. And I think it's happening. When you see a survey that says 75% of Democrats now disagree with administration policy, that is a challenge to the system of control. If the information continues to get out, they may lose control. That's the reason to pass this act. That's the reason to try to get the monitors into the schools and the universities, to try to control the information and to try to make sure that the people in the United States have no understanding of what their money is being used for. It's being used to basically murder innocent people, women and children who are defenseless.
Well, we're talking about Jewish economic influence and power in the United States. It does seem to be overwhelming, Sylvia. We can talk about it all we want, but these people aren't going away.
Well, I don't think most Jews agree with this. And it's my hope that, because, the whole basis of the Jewish religion is ethics and morality, and this is unethical and it's immoral. I can't imagine that most Jews would go along with this. But I think we need to acknowledge the fact that this period in the United States, from the end of the 19th century to today, has been basically a golden age for the Jewish community. Never before have Jews had so much opportunity, economic opportunity and economic influence and social freedom and social influence as they've had in the United States over this period of time. I mean, the result is astonishing if you take a look at it. We had these Jewish immigrants come in who had nothing, the clothes on their back, who had their products oftentimes on their backs as they went around rural America. And then we saw the creation of these enormous Jewish-owned retail stores. Sears Roebuck, the Sears Roebuck catalog was influential to the development of the United States. all of these enormous department stores, they're all Jewish, from Corsac to Bergdorf to et cetera, et cetera. These Jewish immigrants also created Wall Street. They created Goldman and Sachs were both Jews. The Schiffs, the Wahlbergs, the Loebs. Modern finance was created by these Jewish immigrants. This has been a golden age, and it's reflected throughout the Jewish community as a whole, where a majority of Jews have a college or an advanced degree. Over 50% make over 100,000 a year, and 23% make over 200,000 a year. So they're better educated and more affluent than the average American. And this has been the result of the freedom that this country has afforded to the people who have come here. And you can't pull the ladder up after your success. You can't decide now that, oh no, we're not going to have economic freedom. We're not going to have political freedom. We're not going to have freedom of speech. We're not going to have freedom of association. That can't happen. We need to come together as a group of Americans. Forget about what your religion is. Forget about what your ethnicity is. It is worth coming together to save the Bill of Rights and to save that tradition of freedom in the United States. And I have confidence that our Jewish brothers and sisters will join with us in this effort once they understand what the issue is. Right now, the issue is trying to be obfuscated. When the ADL does this survey of anti-Semitism, they include in it anything that can cast any doubt or provide any information about what's actually going on in Israel. So the Jewish community in the United States, just like the wider community, is uninformed and misinformed about what's going on, because we all watch the news, which is censored. We all watch television, which is censored. And if you do that, you get one narrative and one narrative alone. And that narrative supports militarism, which is destroying our country. It supports Zionism, which is destroying Israel. And it supports destruction of the Bill of Rights, which is destroying the freedom upon which this country was founded. I oppose it, and I hope everybody in this country opposes it as well.
Very well said, Sylvia. I have to ask you this, though, because this term, anti-Semitism, has been bandied about all over the place. Could you help me personally, understand what anti-Semitism is? What is anti-Semitism? Help me understand this.
What it really is, rather than what this. You go online to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance and look at their definition of anti-Semitism and look at the 11 examples. Just about anything that you say or do, if a Jewish person is involved, and sometimes even if a Jewish person is not involved, can be classified as anti-Semitism. But that's not what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is trying to say that the entire Jewish community, without any exception, has certain negative characteristics. That is what anti-Semitism is. It's not the ability to have an honest discussion. As I said in, I think, the very first interview that we did, reality cannot be anti-Semitic. History cannot be anti-Semitic. The facts cannot be anti-Semitic. And if you put these kinds of standards into effect, what it means is you will not be able to have any research. You won't be able to research what actually happened in the Holocaust. You won't actually be able to learn what led to it. You won't be able to do any investigation into how it is that the state of Israel got to this point in terms of history. You won't be able to do any of that because it will be called anti-Semitic. And so we need to be very careful. At this point, it's almost as if it's worthless to even have that term. When you talk about the the financial success of Jews, not only in the United States, but in Europe and in many parts of the world. When you talk about their political and economic success, how is it possible for this group to be legitimately discriminated against when they have come together with an enormous amount of money and social power and put an alliance together that would nip that in a bud in 2 minutes? So I don't see anti-Semitism as a threat. I see the use of anti-Semitism as a means of shutting down honest discussion is the threat. And the threat is that we will lose our liberty as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. That's the threat. I don't see anti-Semitism at this point in our history as a threat. But I will say this: if this continues, and if we continue to see the things that are going on in Israel go on, and we can continue to see the population of Israel act the way they're acting right now, that there will be a blowback and there will be a backlash. And I'm afraid that it will include the kinds of anti-Semitism that we've seen in the past that's caused so much trouble. You know, we need to step forward and stop this before it goes any further, because only bad things can happen from here on out. Whether it's the fact that that Israel finally gets to completely transport all the Palestinians out of Gaza and out of the West Bank, to then begin to threaten their neighbors to be able to acquire lands as well. This needs to stop right now. We need to have an honest conversation, and we need to change U.S. policy, and we need to get this to stop before the backlash gains momentum.
Yeah, well, there's another thing that we really haven't talked about, but in spite of or despite of this overwhelming vote in the House of Congress, there are many Congress people who now are promising to punish not only the students, but ordinary Americans who participate in these anti-Israeli, anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian movements. You mentioned that they're threatening the students with expulsion. They're threatening them with never getting jobs. In terms of other Americans, it's the same thing. They'll threaten them with their jobs. They'll threaten them with their social circles and alienation. I mean, this is really something pernicious that we've never seen before in the United States. And I agree with you. It's time for all Americans, as you said, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion, to come together to protect what has made us free, to protect what has made us a prosperous country. The influences that we're seeing now on the establishment are bound and determined to destroy the United States.
Well, and those same threats will be made against the Jews who decide that they also want to see freedom preserved and want to see peace come to the Middle East. They will be threatened as well. They will be blacklisted. There'll be threats from their social circle. But the power of people can overcome this. The power of numbers can overcome this. What we need to see happen is we need to see the people that are targeted by AIPAC and the ADL get reelected. We need to demand on the part of people who are running that they represent the people of the United States, not this small group of people who has a very, very narrow, these people have a very narrow interest. They don't have the overall interest of the people of the United States at heart. They don't have the overall interest of the Jewish community in the United States at heart. They have this very narrow interest at heart. And that's this dream, this Zionist dream of the conquest of the entire Middle East. And, that will lead to a world war that will destroy all of us. So that's why I say it's time for us to come together and stop this.
We are in a very difficult time. The war in the Middle East, as you alluded to, it has already begun. Hamas and the PLO are striking back at Israeli settlements, at Israeli positions. The Houthis have continue to strike at Israeli influence. I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes, but it's reported that Iraq and Syria and even Iran are involved in this conflict, which I think, if this continues, if Netanyahu continues with his quest to eliminate the people in Gaza, he says it's for Hamas, but he's killing innocent people. This is going to explode. I don't see how it can be contained. Now, I want to shift gears and go back to something we only alluded to before. There are a number of myths that have got to be explored and debunked. Can you begin to help us understand what these are and why? Boy, it happened again. This seems to be happening regularly, and I don't know what the cause is, but I've been having trouble with several of my guests being able to continue and stay connected. I've done everything I can to try to troubleshoot this, from finding the fastest service with my VPN to trying to increase the speed and capacity of my computer. Nothing seems to be working. This interview with Sylvia Demarest is extremely important, and I was hoping that we could continue to explore the myths surrounding Israel and Zionism, and to explore the damage that they've done not only to their neighbors in the Middle East, but to the United States. Well, today is May 9th, and in Russia, it's a very important holiday, perhaps one of the most important. It's Victory Day. And today, Russia again celebrated, as it has for 79 years, since the end of World War II, with a victory parade in Red Square. This Victory Day commemorates the sacrifice of the Soviet Red Army and the Soviet people, who lost 27 million people in that horrendous war to defeat Nazi Germany. And today, Russia finds itself again in a fight to defeat Nazism in Ukraine and wherever it's springing up its ugly head across Europe and in the United States. It's an important day to remember, and one that the West cannot whitewash from history. It was the Soviet people, the Soviet Red Army, that defeated Nazi Germany. It was not the United States and its allies, who suffered far less than the Soviet people. May 9th, Russia, Victory Day.